Hello. Thank you for visiting the Other Woman and Man Stories channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And here we go. Michael and Sarah had been married for 7 years, but in all that time, they still didn't have a place of their own. In the beginning of their marriage, the couple lived in Sarah's parents' house, then in the apartment of Michael's friend, who went abroad to work. After that, they moved into a rental apartment, but the constant moving finally wore them down, and the spouses decided, despite all the difficulties, to get their own housing. It was a thoughtful and weighed decision. And here, at last, they became the happy owners of their own apartment, but also a large loan. Sarah really wanted to help her husband cope with the loan for their new apartment. She got a job at a large company. Although Sarah tried her hardest, it was very difficult for her. The secretary job required high typing speed, knowledge of office equipment, and the ability to navigate documents. But she had little experience in office work. In addition, her boss, a tall, stern man in his 50s, constantly criticized Sarah, pointed out mistakes, and demanded she redo documents. After each conversation with him, Sarah could barely hold back her tears. And once the boss publicly reprimanded her in front of all the employees for typos in an important letter. Sarah was so ashamed that she ran out of the office into the bathroom and cried bitterly there. She felt like she could never do this job well. But Sarah endured because her salary was needed by the family to pay off the loan. "Maybe you shouldn't work there, honey?" Michael asked every time she complained after a hard day at work. "Stay home for a while and then find something better where it won't be so hard for you." But Sarah understood. Their debt for the apartment was just huge, and Michael alone could not handle it. She desperately wanted to help her husband. Soon Sarah's boss was replaced. A dignified and attractive man came to this position who had a great sense of humor and immediately won over all the employees. But it wasn't his wit or even his beauty that captivated Sarah. She recognized in him that very boy she had hopelessly fallen in love with in her youth. He was 2 years older than her and went to the same school. After his graduation, Sarah was very upset, realizing that she would never see him again. And here, after so many years, he was standing before her again, just as charming, smiling, and cheerful as before. A wave of nostalgia splashed in Sarah's soul, and she spent the rest of the day lost in memories of her school years. She was no longer afraid to go to the boss's office. On the contrary, she literally ran there to catch another glimpse of him. "You know, Sarah," he said after a work-related conversation, "I have this feeling that I've seen you somewhere before." "We went to the same school," she replied. "I was 2 grades below you." The boss gently scolded her for not immediately saying she recognized him and let her get back to work. From then on, he began to constantly chat with her, ask how she was doing, and act more like an old acquaintance than a subordinate. Sarah enjoyed this. She was pleased that the very guy she had once liked so much was now simply standing near her, talking to her, and joking about his ex-wife. She felt like she could listen to his voice forever. At that time, at 13, she would have given anything to stand next to her crush like this. "Maybe we can meet after work and reminisce about school days." The boss smiled at lunch. Sarah realized she shouldn't agree. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it would lead to something forbidden, but still replied that she didn't mind having a drink after work at some bar. The boss was delighted and promised to book a table for them tomorrow. Michael noticed changes in his wife. She no longer complained about the difficulty of work. On the contrary, Sarah ran to the office with such a happy face that it warmed the man's heart. It meant everything was fine for her. He was glad his wife had finally come to love her job. But he did not know that things were not so simple. Of course, Sarah hid from him the fact that the day after their meeting with the boss at the bar, they'd made love right in his office. She was making up for everything she had dreamed of in school, holding hands, kissing, hugging, and talking about everything under the sun for a long time. The happiness of realizing that her childhood dream was coming true right now drove her crazy. She even changed her behavior at home. Michael couldn't be happier with his wife. She was always in a cheerful mood, practically stopped drinking over trifles, lost weight, and changed her hairstyle. And their married life seemed to take on new colors. Unfortunately, a vile betrayal was hiding behind all this. Sarah began to run into the boss's office so often that unflattering rumors spread around the office about what they were doing there. Once, in the bathroom, the woman overheard what her colleagues were saying about her. She cried and went to her lover to tell him everything. "They all know," she said in annoyance, and new tears welled up in her eyes. "Sarah, it's hard to hide anything in the team." Her boss tried to calm her down. "It's okay. What if someone tells Michael everything? What will I do?" she sobbed. "No one will tell, don't worry. They will be afraid of getting fired. Everything is fine, dear." Sarah was carried away by the memories again. How she had once dreamed that he would sit next to her and comfort her like this. Every time she cried in her youth, Sarah imagined her beloved hugging her and whispering words of consolation. She didn't even understand if she loved her boss now or was just projecting her teenage dreams and experiences onto him. But she couldn't help herself. She was drawn into this maelstrom of passion, desire, and prohibition. One day, in the midst of the workday, Michael received a message from an unknown number on his phone. It contained a short text and a very poor quality photo. "Your wife is cheating on you," was written in the message. And in the picture, Sarah was kissing some man. Everything inside Michael snapped. He did not expect betrayal at all from his beloved. He could not understand how a woman who treated him with such tenderness, who jealously guarded their family hearth, could so easily cross out everything they had built together over the years. Michael was so angry about his wife's infidelity that he did not wait for the evening and went to her job right now. There was real chaos in his head from thoughts and emotions. He felt deeply humiliated, deceived, and betrayed. How could she do this to him after so many years of marriage? Michael gripped the steering wheel so hard that his knuckles turned white. He was shaking with anger and adrenaline. Taking the elevator up to the 6th floor of the office center, Michael walked down the hall, barely moving his legs. It seemed as if weights were attached to his boots, so difficult it was to walk. His heart was pounding loudly, and his temples were squeezed by a dull, throbbing pain. Without saying a word to the secretary, Michael threw open the door to Sarah's office. She looked up at him with frightened eyes. From her appearance, he immediately realized everything. The message did not lie. Sarah was as pale as a sheet, her lips trembling. She clearly did not expect to see her husband. Michael breathed heavily, all red with anger. He could barely restrain himself from attacking his wife with his fists. In a gaze full of hatred, he hissed a single question: "Who is he?" Sarah was silent. She looked at her enraged husband in horror, unable to utter a word. "Who?" Michael yelled, raising his voice. Sarah shuddered at his tone. "The boss," she whispered barely audibly, lowering her eyes. Ignoring the secretary's desperate screams, Michael rushed out of the office and burst into the adjoining door, into the boss's office. He was just having an important meeting with partners, but the deceived husband didn't care at all. Michael completely lost control of himself and began brutally beating his wife's lover right in his office. He hit him in the face and body with his fists, indiscriminately and mercilessly. In a rage, Michael continued to strike blows, even when the boss fell to the floor, shielding himself with his hands. As a result of this attack, the boss suffered serious injuries: a broken nose, split lip, and a cracked jawbone. When the guards finally pulled the enraged Michael away, the boss's face was a bloody mess. He was rushed to the hospital immediately. There, doctors stitched up the boss and put a cast on his broken jaw. Despite the brutal beating, the victim decided not to go to the police. Perhaps he was ashamed of his immoral behavior, or perhaps he did not want the incident to receive wide publicity and damage his career. One way or another, Sarah's husband got away with it. Everyone in the office knew what it was about. Sarah had to quit. She was unbearably ashamed after what happened. Colleagues whispered behind her back, someone openly mocked, and someone expressed sympathy. But she could no longer work there after such a scandal. Her husband filed for divorce immediately, without hesitation. No matter what, he did not want to tolerate a cheating wife next to him, despite all her tears, excuses about teenage infatuation, and old feelings. Sarah had hoped her lover would offer to live together, but it didn't happen. And a little later she learned that the boss's ex-wife was not at all ex. They still lived together and raised their 5-year-old daughter. For her, it was a blow from which she could not recover for a long time. After being fired, Sarah struggled to find work for a long time. She became depressed, feeling useless. Their joint apartment was purchased with a mortgage, so after the divorce they had to sell it to pay off the bank. Neither of them had enough funds to buy out the other's share. After selling the apartment and paying off the mortgage, they were left with only small sums. Both Sarah and Michael were forced to rent modest apartments on the outskirts of the city. Sarah barely found a new job. She barely had enough money for food and bills. Michael felt unhappy without Sarah, despite the divorce. So Sarah's foolish mistake led to the loss of their shared housing and financial difficulties for them both. In time, financial difficulties will be solved, heart wounds will be healed, and they will find their happiness again, but already separately. That's the story. Share your thoughts in the comments about this situation and the behavior of the spouses. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and be sure to like this video. It will greatly help promote the channel. Take care and have a wonderful day.